Okay, now we're back and we're gonna learn how to build forms because that's an essential part of HTML. You might have seen stuff where people build forms. So I'm gonna have the help here, Troy, I guess that's username, uh, in the live share. So we have a live share going on here. You can download the live share extension. Uh, so let's go to signup.html. And by the way, if you're using live share there, let me close this. Oops. Hold on. Don't start yet. Don't start yet. So let me save the file. A bit by two files or don't save. Okay, hold on. Let me just have one open. Otherwise, so you can click this icon here to follow participant, and that way you follow the person there. And okay. So let's build a form. So usually the form to build it is you have to have a container called the form element. So yeah, why don't you write the form element there? So angle brackets form. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Let me open on the side the sign up. I don't think you can see the live preview necessarily, right? But oops, I should remove this and put the doc type there. Sorry. HTML. Okay, cool. So now remember, when we do forms, fill out forms, there's text areas, text inputs, there's radio buttons where you select only one of the choices available, there's checkboxes, there are date selectors, so on. Let's start with simple sign up form as somebody signing up on a new account for the website. So we can start off, how do would somebody write an email? So the tag here would be the input tag. So if you put an input tag, open tag, input. Yeah, and you could just close it there. So if you do that, you see on the live preview that I can type something here as text. But this tag is also self-closing in the sense that you don't have to put a closing tag. But it's a very powerful tag and versatile because it can have many forms. And the first form we want to do is the one for email. Actually, if you do just normal text, you can add an attribute here, type, and the default is text. Sorry, I'm typing. And yeah, so this is the most generic one. But if you want to be able to validate email patterns, you would change this type to actually email. So you want to change it to email. Yeah, so basically it's basically the same thing, except if you were to submit the form, it would validate this as an email. So if you type something wrong, like doesn't have an @ sign, it would complain, hey, this is not an email. So that's the difference with the text. Obviously, if you look at it right now, if a user comes into this page, they don't know what the heck is going on because it's just a text box. Okay, what do I type here? So we got to add a label. So before the input, we have to add a label. So there's an element called label. So it's just like a paragraph, except you can use label and it type the text between the tags. Yeah. Yeah, so you can type it before the input, line 10. Yeah. Close it and then email. Yeah. Cool. So that way the user now knows, oh, okay, I have to type the email. Nice. Okay, great. So usually we use when we have a label and an input, we group them together to make it better organized. And the way I do it is with a generic element, container element that's called a div. So you might see this a lot, a div enclosing the label and input. So it's better organized. So the next one will be another div. Let's say the password, right? You got to type the password. How would you do it? First, you have the label that says password, and then you got the input for the password. The VS Code made you the the two quotes. Yeah. Yeah, so you already know it. There's a different type password. Cool. Let's add the label password in. Yeah, cool. Nice. Yeah, as you see, the user will understand that, okay, I gotta type the password. Now, what's the difference between type, password, email, so on? Well, type passwords, basically the characters are kind of bullet points or hidden. So that's the difference. So if it were to be text, you would see my password. And we don't want that, so we just make a password. And yeah, so this input tag is very versatile. We can adapt to email, password, can even do URLs. And as we'll see later, it can be used for date and so on. Okay, great. So what else? Yeah, just I want to point out, why did we add the divs? Another reason, look, if I don't have the div, I remove it, everything will be in one line. So it's kind of sucks. If I want one per line, the div makes sure that pushes anybody else on to the side down to the next line, because as we see later, the div element by default, its CSS display property is block. Okay, that's why it does that. All right, that's cool. Now, what else? What other kind of information would we do? What about the date of birth of the person? I know it's probably not what we asked, but just for the sake of uh, practice, how would you show like a date picker? So you put a label here, let's say date of birth, label, and then you would use inputs, but the type here would be try using date there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. See what? Let's watch what happens there. Did you see the input change form? Now it's a date picker. If I click the calendar, oh wow, I can pick the date, or I could type it myself here. Very powerful. So input component or element can take on many forms. Nice. Yeah, so you can go on and try different things. What else haven't we tried? So we got date of birth. Anybody have any suggestions for what to add to the form? So registration form. Yeah, text area. How about text area? Okay, let's add a div and let's ask for the person for their biography or bio. What element would you use intuitively? An input, but actually it's not an input. So when you have multi-line text, what we use what's called text area. Yeah. So the element name is text area. So you angle brackets, text area. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you need a closing tag. Yeah, exactly. And usually we don't say anything between unless you want to show some value there, but I don't want to. So yeah, nice. So we got the text area, which is basically a multi-line text. So 1, 2, and you can expand here like this. There's a rows attribute you can change here if you want to change the default behavior. So for example, 5 rows by default, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so that's the default display. Okay, cool. Let's see, what else can we do? So you probably have seen these multiple choice questions where I can only select one. Yeah, radios. What could you do for radios here? Let me show a div. So what would you ask about choices the person would make? Any suggestions? Oh, not select, not select yet. Now I'm just asking you, what would you add to the form if you have like a radio buttons? Radio is like the circle. Let me show you here, like this. Input type radio, like that. You see, there's a circle there. If I duplicate 3 times, it's like I can select like that. Uh, at, so usually we add something choice 1, choice 2, web language. Okay, let's do that one. Let's say your favorite programming language. How about that? Obviously, there's so many, but I'll just add, I don't know, for the sake of our course, let me just do this. Okay, so you can select HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. Uh, let me, so you can see there, let me put this in a div here so it pushes the thing to a new line. Or you can put a paragraph or whatever. Okay. For the sake of example, you can only pick one HTML, CSS, and JavaScript from the choices. But if you look right now, I can pick multiple. That's because they're not grouped together. And to group them together, what you do is add an attribute, name, and let's call it favorite language. And all of them have to have the same name attributes. I'm going to copy here and there. That way they're grouped together. So when I pick, only one of them is picked. Okay? So this is the name attribute. And in fact, if you were to submit the form, all the inputs should have a name. Otherwise, the server who is listening, when you submit the form, the information goes somewhere, and that somewhere is the backend server. They have to understand what you're sending. So if you just send the inputs without any kind of identifier or name, they wouldn't know what you're sending. So let's go here, start from line 12. I wanted to add a name attribute to this input and just call it email so that the server, when they receive this information, they will see email and the value that was typed. Yeah. And then we do the same for password and so on. Yeah, cool. And then for the date, give it a descriptive name. I don't know what you're going to call that. How would you call date of birth? Oh, okay. Using camel case, that's fine. Great. I see you already know about camel case, which is this naming convention of the words are together, but the first letter of every second word is capitalized, like of, birth, but the first one is not. Cool. And then biography packs area, you need a name there. So make sure when you're writing HTML forms that every single thing that the user can type or input information has to have a name attribute. So the backend server knows what piece of information is what. I just call it biography. Biography is good. Yeah. All right, cool. Just add an H there. Oops, sorry. Thanks so much. Yeah, if anybody have any questions, let me know. What else? Yeah, I see you were typing before select, even though I didn't intend to. What would we do for the select? It's kind of like the radio, but it's just a different way, right? It's like a drop down. Anybody having suggestions what we would use for the select? Now that let's add another one. And then I don't know, let's call it whatever we're gonna call it. So we had a favorite programming language. Okay, favorite color. Oh, there's so many, but okay. Favorite color. Let's just add 3, okay? Because there's just too many. Let's say there's a select drop down for 3 colors. So I see you already know select. So the name of the element is select. It's kind of like the list, we have a container select element, and then we have the option elements. Yeah. Yeah, you have select, and then inside we add the option. It's just like list item. Cool. Yeah, I just have 3 of them. Yeah, you can type any color you want there. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, as you can see, if you allow me to explain, on the right-hand side in the live preview, it's basically a drop-down, or this is called a select. You can click and there's choices, and you can pick from one of them. Basically, it's like a different version of the what we did for the radio. Whereas the radio, you can see all of them, and you can click with the fill to fill it in. These select is like selecting here. Okay, so a different way of selecting an options. So like all the other demos, let's add some more attributes here. For the select, let me type here. We would add a name and maybe say this is like favorite color. So that way the server knows what you're talking about. Usually we want to do for every option, we have labels, but every option should have a value attribute. So the server internally would keep that value, for example, red and then blue. It could be an ID like 1, 2, 3 as well. That's something internal that you don't necessarily need to understand, but that's how it's keeping track or stored in the server. And for the purposes of the user facing, you would only change the label here between the tags because that's what the user see. They don't actually see the value here. That's only for the backend that will see that. It could be red, it could be 1, blue could be 2, green could be 3 as well. Depends on how you built the system. Okay, but if you want to keep it simple, just put the words so you know what it is. Okay, we got that. Let's just let me allow me to add a button here. So if you wanna, let's try to submit this. So if you want to submit the form, you need a button that submits that. So there's 2 ways. You can add a button element or you can add an input. So if you go, let me type it here, okay? If you do the input way, remember input can take on many forms. You can change the input type to submit and it will look like that. It will show submit. If you want to change the label, add the value different here. For example, register. That's one way, okay, of submitting it. Now another way, let me comment this. By the way, when I comment something, it means I mark this piece of code as something to be ignored by the computer. In HTML, to make a comment, you add the less than exclamation dash dash to start the comment, and then to finish is dash dash greater than. That way, this is actually omitted from the actual output there that you see. To the hotkey that I use is Control / in VS Code to comment uncomment. Okay, so that's one way. Now, another way is with the button. You might see that a lot as well. If I do button type submit, make sure it's type submit, because that way you associate this button as the whole submission button for the whole form. And this one has a closing tag, so you put whatever label inside, like register. See, so 2 different ways of making a submit button. Okay, so now how do we submit? Well, traditionally, you would go to the form. If you go to line 9, you have to add 2 attributes. The first is the method, and the second is the action. So basically, when we submit forms, what it does is makes what's called an HTTP request. That's how we communicate. Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Okay, that's the protocol that's used to establish the communication and send messages elsewhere. So you have to give it a method, which is basically, if you ever seen get, post, and other stuff, that's the method. When you go in the browser and you type anything in the address bar and press enter, that's actually making a get request. Okay, get. to some server. Hey, I want to get something. Okay, but when we submit forms, we want to use what's called a post request. And the reason is if you do get, all the information will be included in the URL, and that could be logged. So your password could be seen in the log files for the server. Okay, I can demonstrate that in a bit, but let me just, by default it's post, okay? But I'll demonstrate get so you see what's happening. But don't use get for forms. The action is a place where you want to submit this to. Since we don't have a backend server, I will give you a fake one, this one here, and that's the action there. Okay, that's the fake one. Now, to demonstrate that, allow me to go to a different browser here, because this one is going to be act weird. So for now, I'm just going to go and share my screen on the browser. And I'm going to go here to sign up. And I'm going to open the DevTools. And you want to go to the network tab and make sure the filter is all. Otherwise, you might hide it. And I'm going to submit the form right now. I'm just going to type something here. Some random information. And click register. Now you see what happened when I type an email that's not valid. This is why we use input type email, so it validates. So I need an @ mail.com, let's say. And okay. Now if you notice the request here, this is how you analyze the HTTP request. You click here, and you see the request method was get, and then the URL, what's this? But look at the URL. This is the action. Okay, this, if you didn't notice, followed by a question mark and pairs of property name, =, value, and they're together with an ampersand. So user equals something, %40 mail.com. By the way, the %40 is just a codified version of the @ sign, okay, encoded. And then a percent to add another one, password equals something. You see my password here in the URL? So that's the problem here. We don't want to show all this information. When the server receives this, they will log the URL. Okay, so we don't want to prevent that and move all the information to the body of the request. Now to do that, we go here and change the method to post. So if you go back here, line 9, I change that to post. Okay, so whenever you do forms, method should be post. Okay, method post. Now I'm going to save that and try it again in the browser. If I refresh, I'll go back here, refresh, because I changed the code. Let me crash everything so it's clear. Click this icon, something at mail.com, test, type something there. Hello, it's me. CSS in red, I'm sure blue, register. Now you can see, now it's no longer in the URL, but actually it's as a payload here. And if you look at the source here, this is what's actually sent in the form data. It's just a property name, which is the name attribute, right? =, the value, and then ampersand, the other one, password, which is the name attribute, =, the value that I typed, and date of birth, and then here's the format for the date, and so on and so on, okay? Obviously, the browser is very nice that it allows us to click this nicer version, that it parses that in one per line, so it's easier for us to see, okay? And then you can click view decoded to make the %40 become an @ sign, and the spaces become from plus to an actual space, okay? So very nice. So it's actually created something there in the fake server, if you notice that, but it's just fake, okay? And then the response from the server is, okay, here's the information that I created. We added an ID. Usually that's what happens when you create something new. It gives you an ID of that thing. And this is just all fake, but it's this, you got a user of ID 11 now. It's like your account number. Okay, and if you notice, color is blue, and favorite language on. So by default, that radio, whatever you select, appears as on here, which is kind of weird. That's wrong, right? It should appear as the actual HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so we can fix that. And the other ones look okay to me. So let's fix the radio. So the radio is easy to fix. You just gotta add a value, like we did for options here. You see, you go back to the radio here. What you gotta do is add a value for each. For this one is HTML, and then the other one would be value CSS, and then the other one would be value for JavaScript. And that way, if you have a value associated with each input type radio and you select it, that's what's going to appear when you submit the form instead of on. If we try it again here, refresh, type something for the I marked CSS, and let me type an email. I don't think I need the others. Register, you can see here, favorite language CSS as the payload, favorite language CSS. And if you read the actual thing that's passed, favorite language CSS as well. That way you fix that problem. Okay, so yeah, that's the sign up form. Let me add let's see, a div here for this top, because I don't want the link to be next to this sign up. A cheap way to add push everything to the new line is add a div enclosing that if it's pure HTML without CSS. Okay, something I didn't talk about was checkbox, very similar to radio. So if I go back here before the register, I can add something input type checkbox, and it's just like a square instead of a circle. And this one is meant to be like things to mark as, for example, usually we have something like I agree to the terms, and you would check, right? And then something like subscribe to newsletter, and you would agree like checking that. Now, if you want to make that in a new line, you can add a div enclosing it to push everything like that. So it's nicer. Push the button register to the bottom. And here you could add like a div to group them if you want, or you can just add if you want to add a header like please, I don't know, let's say agree to the terms. And then usually somebody would add a terms, right? You could do as a text area to show that. I don't want to do it, but let's add some lorem 7 here. Basically, you could put a text area, you scroll, person would read, and then they would check, okay, I agree. All right. Yeah, any questions so far? And we're linked, we go sign up, so on. Let me teach you something about associating labels with the inputs, because this you might I don't know if you know about this behavior. Typically, for example, the radio here. Let's go to the radio. If you click the HTML, typically you want to mark that as filled, right? But that doesn't happen. When I click CSS, nothing happens. How can I make that happen? Well, it's easy. All you do is you take the input with the label and put in a label tag. So I put a label open here, and then I close after the HTML text. That way, if I click HTML, it's marked. Very cheap, right? So if you don't like this, you can break a line to make it easier to read like that. Okay, so basically enclose the input and the text in a label, and that should automatically, when you click the word, it will mark it. Okay, so I put a label here, label here, label, And yeah, now I can click JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. You can do the same for all the other inputs. If I click email, I want that to be focused. This is what we call the state. When we click the pointer to type, that's focused. So if I scroll up here to email and the input, to associate these two, I have to do the following. Find the input, add an ID attribute. An ID attribute is something that uniquely identifies the element, and there can be no other element with this ID, okay? It's unique. So add an ID here. Usually I like to name it like a sign up form and then the name of the field, which is email. That way it's very specific and it will not lead to conflict because there could be different things on a page. And if you label something very small like email, there could be another form that could, I don't know, by accident have the same ID, which is not permitted. And that's why I always put this kind of prefix or namespace. So it's more specific and it's less likely somebody else will come to the code and write this very same ID. So then you take this ID and associate with the label by going to label, adding the attribute for, and then typing the same ID, sign dash up dash form dash email. That way, when I click email, it focuses the field. Okay, click email, it focuses. And notice I use this convention of a name, word separated by a dash, okay, for the ID. That's one naming convention. But what you shouldn't do is have spaces, okay? Don't put spaces here. Otherwise, it will think it's two different things or, three different things or four different things. Okay, no spacing allowed. If you need separate words, use the dashed case or use the camel case or no spaces, okay? Cool, okay, so volunteer, do you want to help out trying to associate? My goal is to click password and focus the password field. How would I do that here? So you give an ID to input and then you write for the label with that same value for ID. So we would go here, give it an ID. Let's say sign dash up dash form dash password. Go to the label you want to associate with, add for attribute, and then type the same ID, sign up, form, password. That way, when I click password, it focuses the field. Okay, and then can do the same for all of the other ones. You want to try doing for date of birth? Uh-huh. Yes. Now let's test it. I click date of birth. Yes, it's focused. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Uh, let's talk about more. Remember how I put input type email and it validated for me? Now, if I click register right now, it's going to complain. Oh, it didn't complain. Why? That's weird. Let's go back to the browser because this one is a bit weird sometimes. Let me just bring this up again and go to the browser external. I want to go back here. And if you remember, I refresh and I click register without an email, it complains. Hey, why isn't it complaining? What's going on here? Did we remove type email? Or is just because I got to type? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, if you notice, when I don't type email, it's letting me go through. I don't want that. I want this to be required. How can we do that? Well, you add a required attribute. So go to email, input, just write require there. You want to write it? Yes. So just required, and that field will be validated. If it's empty, it will complain. If I go here and save that, go to the browser, refresh first, and try to submit. Please fill out this field. Let me zoom in for you. So this is built-in HTML validation that you get by just adding the attribute required to the input. So if I don't fill anything, it's going to complain. If I type A, then the email validation kicks in due to the type email. So it's very convenient. Now we can do the same for password, add it required, and then biography and any other text field that you want to be not allowed any empty space. Let's go here. Let's do input, password required. Yeah, biography required. I guess it could require that. Date of birth as well if you want. Yeah, okay. Do we want to require biography? We could add that as well. Try adding that. Yeah, it's a very cheap way to validate. But I must tell you that even though we have front-end validation, that's not trustworthy because anybody could go in the DevTools and change it or tamper with the request. So what we do is, although we have front-end validation, what actually matters is the back-end validation of the server side. We're not doing that right now, but keep that in mind that you should always, when you think about validation, never trust the front end to be, something that's always going to be, validated completely. Somebody could always tamper with the front end. So the true validation that we should do is the back end to enforce any rules. So whenever you're developing things, it's nice to have front-end validation to make it a better user experience. But I understand that we should actually be focusing validation on the back end and enforce all the rules there, because that's where the actual request is received. And there's as you receive it, somebody could have tampered with the request. So the back end will verify that. Okay, so yeah, I think we're good for now. And with HTML.